Could you provide your name, birthday, place of birth, and family background?
My name is Michael Whitaker. I was born February 21, 1963 on Lemoore Naval Air Station in California.
Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
My mother worked for the state of California as a secretary for a long time. My father was in the Navy.
Do you have any siblings? And if so, which of any served in the military?
I do have one brother and one sister, neither of which served at all.
This is regarding your educational background. Can you please provide an overview of your educational background?
Well, of course, I graduated high school in California, and then I went into the service, and all of my college education has been while on active duty. Pretty much a Bachelor of Science in History.
Did you learn anything about Korea in school or college? And if so, what were some things that you remember learning in school?
I learned a little bit about Korea in college, just with some military history courses. Not a pretty sight, the Korean War, but all war is brutal, basically.
What were you doing before you entered the service?
Before I entered the service, I left high school. I kind of just went out and experienced life a little bit. I lived in Alaska for about a year. Then I was down in Louisiana working on a tugboat for about a year and a half. And then I went back home. Back home just doing odd jobs, kind of feeling going nowhere fast, which prompted me to enlist in the Army.
And what branch of military did you serve?
I was Army.
Were you enlisted or drafted into the military? And if enlisted, why did you choose a specific branch of the military?
I definitely enlisted, and I chose infantry just because it sounded like something exciting, outdoors. I didn't want to be in an office. I wanted to do something that engaged me.
Do you remember the date at which you entered service?
I entered active duty on 26 April 1984.
What happened when you departed for training and during your early days of training?
A little bit of it's a blur. I remember arriving at Fort Benning for basic training. Back then it was still pretty hardcore. Things were starting to change but hadn't quite hit basic training yet, so a lot of yelling and screaming and throwing things around and lots of push-ups.
Did you receive any specialized training? And if so, what training did you receive and when did you receive it?
Well, at the end of basic training, of course, it's one station unit training, AIT. So at the end of basic training, I was selected to become a mortarman, so I did mortar training.
How did you adapt to the military life, including the physical regime, barracks, food, and social life?
I actually don't think there was much adapting at all. I took right to it. I excelled at pretty much everything all throughout training. Commendation when I left training and a promotion when I left training. I found a very easy transition for me.
What about the food and the social life?
The food was good when you had time to eat it. If you were the first platoon in the chow hall, you had time to eat. If you're the last platoon in the chow hall, you're lucky you got a few bites.
Did you learn anything about Korea from the military?
I did not, actually. I knew that it was an assignment choice, but I really didn't know anything about it.
Did you get any particular training to serve in Korea?
I did not.
Did any of your family members serve in the Korean War?
Not that I'm aware of.
What do you think about the legacy of the Korean War veterans?
I think that they were very hard men. I think that they served under very arduous conditions.
Can you describe the nature of the U.S.-Korea relationship?
Well, obviously, allies. After the cessation of hostilities, of course, the U.S. remained on the peninsula to help protect the South from the North.
When de- Depending on your experience of a veteran, please know that this is part of the interview that might be hard for you. What was your unit and specialty during your service?
Well, I've been twice. So in 1993, I went to Korea and I was at Camp Greaves, which is on the north side of the Freedom Bridge, the Imjin River, pretty close to the DMZ. Pretty lockdown conditions then. You couldn't really leave on pass. We're on a 20% pass policy if you wanted, and that was just to go down to another camp where they had a BX commissary or something. The second time I went in 2003, I was stationed at Camp Casey, and both times as a mortarman, infantry mortarman.
What specific area of Korea were you stationed in? Where did you live while you were there? And can you describe your living situation?
Again, Camp Greaves, the first time I was there, kind of an isolated location. We were in the standard Army barracks, kind of stacked in a little bit like cordwood. Camp Casey was a lot better, more spread out. The barracks were nicer. The caserne had a lot more amenities. It actually even had its commissary and little PX.
Did you enjoy your time in Korea? Please describe why or why not you did not like serving in Korea.
I did actually enjoy Korea, more so the second time than the first time, just because I got to experience Korea a little more than the first time. Like the culture, fan of the food. The first time out on a team spirit exercise, carrying a lot of weight, developed axillary thrombus. Nobody really knew what was wrong with me. Just my arm had swelled up, so they were treating me for a sports injury. It was about a month after the fact when they finally sent me down to the 121 evac hospital in Seoul, and they did a venogram, and I was medevaced out of Korea, and that was pretty much the end of my first tour in Korea.
Where did they medevac you to?
I went to Tripler Army Medical Center in Honolulu.
Were you ever stationed near the DMZ, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, so the DMZ was, like I said, it was pretty much a lockdown environment, but also maybe a little scary in some respects because kind of out there alone. In fact, that was one of the unit's motto, stand alone. Right on the other side of the bridge, kind of felt like we were more of a speed bump. If the North Koreans ever came across the border again, wouldn't think there would be a whole lot we could do about it. I think we were just an early warning device. So in some respects, a little nerve-wracking, but...
Do you have any insight into how the Armistice Agreement of 1953 changed the daily life and operations of the military?
Well, other than going from active hostilities to a ceasefire, I would think that would have a dramatic effect.
Were you part of any rebuilding efforts for the Korean infrastructure? If so, please describe what your role was for these projects.
I was not really part of that.
You served during a time of significant military and political change in Korea. How did those changes impact your unit and your role within the military?
I think the political changes were pretty much complete by the time I got there.
Did you have any interactions with the Korean soldiers who were working as a Katusa? If so, please share the details about your experiences working with these soldiers.
Yes, so my second tour, I did a 2-year tour that time, and I was platoon sergeant, the armor unit, there on Camp Casey, and I had 5 Katusas attached to my platoon. I found them to be really good soldiers, very disciplined. There was Slight language barrier with a couple of them, but most of them spoke pretty good English. And I always went out of my way to include them in all platoon functions. Basically, they were one of us.
Describe any experiences you had working with personnel, soldiers from other UN forces.
I didn't really work with other UN forces, mostly just the Katusas that I had. And of course, during team spirit exercises, you do work somewhat with some of the other Korean companies.
Were you involved in any joint operations or experiences? If so, describe those experiences.
Yeah, not really, just field exercises with other Korean units.
Based on your experience, what kind of relationship did the South Korean military have with the U.S. forces during your times of service?
I thought the relationship was pretty good. From my experiences, just with exercises, they work well together, integrated well into our battle plan or us into theirs.
Were you involved in any joint operations or experiences? If so, describe those experiences.
No, not really. Just, the joint exercises with other Korean units.
Can you recall any stories of camaraderie, humor, or particularly close relationships you had with fellow soldiers, whether South Korean or from Allied forces?
One of my favorite things was the Katusas, 2 days a week, left early so they could go to Taekwondo training. We asked them about it and they invited us, so we went, and it was quite humorous, but we kept going. It was a very good time
Why was it humorous?
because we didn't really know what we were doing. The Katusas would use Taekwondo, and we just used street brawling.
During your service, did you interact with the civilian population? If so, please describe some of the experiences you encountered.
Yeah, well, so again, in the second tour as a platoon sergeant, I was probably once every 9 or 10 days courtesy patrol downtown in Tongdishan, mostly just policing up soldiers that might get rowdy or might need to go home, but interacted a lot with shop owners and restaurant owners and stuff.
What are some examples of the things you would do for recreation when you were off duty?
Me personally, sometimes I would go downtown. I like to eat. There's a couple restaurants downtown that serve really good food. But most of the time, again, being a platoon sergeant, I had other responsibilities. So if I wasn't on courtesy patrol, I was policing my own soldiers.
Did you communicate with loved ones at home? If so, how did you communicate with them, and what were things you would share with them?
Well, interestingly, the first time I was there in '93, we just had a single phone in the hallway that all the soldiers in the barracks used to receive or make calls. That was a little challenging. Second tour in 2003, I went downtown and bought a cell phone and a calling card, and I could call whenever I felt like it and receive calls whenever also. Really just sharing basic stuff, miss you, that kind of thing. I've never been one big to share my job with family members.
Did you email, write letters, any other forms of communication?
Email some, not really letters, cards on holidays, stuff like that. Mostly it was cell phone.
What were the most difficult, dangerous, happiest, rewarding memories during your time in service?
Difficult deployments, dangerous deployments, happy, good home work balance. Yeah, and I think one of the hardest things about Korea at the time, especially for an infantryman, there was an unaccompanied tour. So you were in Korea, your family was in the U.S., and it makes it exceedingly difficult. Things go on at home that you can't take care of or be a part of. This makes it difficult all around.
When did your service in Korea end? Was this the end of your service, or did you continue to serve in the military?
No, I left Korea in December 2005 for my second tour, and I continued to serve for another 9 years.
What was your life like for you after your service in Korea? Was it difficult transitioning back to civilian life?
Well, again, I didn't transition back to civilian life, but it is sometimes difficult to transition back to family life after being gone for 2 years on an unaccompanied tour.
What lasting memories from your time in the military do you carry with you today?
The soldiers. Every time we leave somewhere, they give us a farewell gift, have a little dinner or a party or something. The gifts I received from the soldiers in Korea mean the most to me out of all of them.
How did your military experience impact your worldview or your understanding of Korea's place in the world during that time?
Well, I think military service has made me somewhat conservative. And I realized that just looking around that Korea is an economic powerhouse. So yeah, I don't know.
Since your service, have you been involved in any veteran organizations or groups? If so, describe involvement with the organization.
I have not. I'm of the philosophy that once I retired, I hung up the uniform. I'm done with it. New chapter in life.
How did your service shape your view of Korea's national security and the division of the country?
I don't know that it shaped my view. I realize there's a division, there's a demilitarized zone, there's a ceasefire in place. Hostilities really could kick off at any time. Do I think that they will? Probably not, but never say never.
Have you returned to Korea?
I have not.
Would you support the reunification of a divided Korea, and why do you feel this way?
And that's a tough question. I served in Germany in the mid 80s. And of course, while we were there, we had the border with East and West Germany. Not dissimilar to the DMZ in Korea. But in 91, when the wall came down and Germany reunified, it was extremely financially burdensome on West Germany. And I feel like it would be the same, probably even worse, if the two Koreas reunified, just because of the state that North Korea is in.
In your opinion, has the military culture in Korea changed over the years since your time in service?
I think a little bit. Between my two tours and then things I hear about now, I think the U.S. military is pulling back a little bit in some sense, consolidating into larger but fewer bases. I think that the Koreans are becoming much more self-reliant for their own security.
How do you feel about the current state of affairs of the Korean Peninsula, and what do you hope for the future of Korea?
I would hope that Korea just continues to prosper. I think they're doing a very good job. I don't think that, again, that goes back to I don't think reunification would be good for them.
What message would you want future generations to understand about the sacrifices made by veterans and the importance of peace?
Sacrifices made by veterans, whether Korea or anywhere else, are self-explanatory. They're putting their lives and their futures on the line. I'm sorry, repeat the second part.
What message would you want the future generations to understand about the sacrifices made by veterans and the importance of peace?
Peace always preferable to war, always.
Final question. Is there anything else you'd like to share about your experiences or your perspectives?
No, just that I really enjoyed my time in Korea, and culturally, we did take some trips. One of the most memorable for me was when the platoon, we all went down to the Korea War Memorial Museum. Very interesting. Yeah, I'll just finish up and say that I'm glad I served in Korea. I'm proud of my service, part of the Korean defense. I do come from a legacy of military. My father, obviously, and uncle, my grandfather. As I left service, my children were going into service. My wife was in the service. So we are a service family at this point. So I thank you for the opportunity.